Have you ever wondered why Australia has such a problem with carp? This seemingly harmless fish, native to Asia and Europe, has become a significant issue for the land down under. But why, you may ask? Well, let's dive into the history of carp in Australia. The carp's journey to Australia began in the 19th century, a time when Australia was still a young nation, eager to shape its own identity. The reasons for introducing carp were quite practical. In the absence of native freshwater fish species that could serve as a reliable food source, carp were brought in as an alternative. The first recorded instance of carp in Australia dates back to the 1850s. At that time, it was seen as a welcome addition to the local ecosystem. Carp were initially introduced into farm dams and were expected to stay within these confines. However, little did the Australians of the 19th century know that they were setting the stage for an ecological drama that would play out over the next century and a half. The carp quickly took a liking to their new home, and their population exploded. Adaptable and resilient, these fish found the Australian waterways to their liking and soon spread across the continent. The rapid spread of carp was aided by their incredible reproductive capabilities, with a single female capable of producing up to 1 million eggs in a year. But it wasn't just their breeding prowess that allowed carp to colonize Australia's waterways so effectively. Carp are notorious for their ability to survive in a wide range of conditions. They can live in water with low oxygen levels, tolerate high temperatures, and even survive in muddy or polluted waters. This made Australia's diverse and often harsh aquatic environments an ideal habitat for these hardy fish. So as we can see, the carp's journey to Australia was not a natural one, but rather a human-induced migration. But what started as a practical solution to a food supply problem has turned into a major ecological headache. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the carp conundrum in our next segment. But how did a fish introduced for aquaculture purposes become a major environmental problem? Let's take it back to the 1960s. The European carp, a species known for its adaptability and resilience, was released into the Australian waterways. The intention was simple: boost the aquaculture industry, provide a new source of food, and add a little diversity to the ecosystem. But what we didn't anticipate was the carp's exceptional ability to make themselves at home in a variety of water conditions. From the tranquil ponds to the raging rivers, the carp thrived. They adapted, they conquered, and they spread far and wide across the continent. And then there's the carp's impressive reproductive rate. A single female carp can produce up to a staggering 1 million eggs in a year. Yes, you heard it right, 1 million. Now imagine hundreds, thousands of carp all procreating at this rate. It's not hard to see how their numbers exploded, is it? The carp's spread across Australia was not just rapid, but also relentless. They showed a tenacity and adaptability that, while admirable in some contexts, spelled disaster for the native species and the overall health of the waterways. The carp churned up the riverbeds, disturbing the habitats of native fish and altering the water quality. And so, what started as an initiative to diversify our aquatic life and bolster the aquaculture industry quickly spiraled into an environmental crisis. The carp, a fish that was once viewed as a potential asset, transformed into a liability. The carp, once a valued commodity, was now an invasive species wreaking havoc on Australia's waterways. The stage was set for a battle of epic proportions, a battle to reclaim our waterways from the grip of the carp. But that's a story for another time. For now, let's just marvel at the irony of it all. A fish introduced to aid us, now challenging us in ways we could have never imagined. So what's the big deal about a fish, one might ask? Well, let's dive into the impact of carp on the native Australian wildlife and water quality. Carp, as it turns out, are incredibly competitive, edging out native species for resources with their sheer numbers and voracious appetites. By outcompeting native species for food and habitat, they upset the delicate balance of Australia's unique ecosystems. Imagine a rugby match where one team suddenly has twice the players on the field. It's not really a fair game anymore, is it? That's what's happening in our waterways, with carp tipping the scales in their favor. But the carp's impact extends beyond just competition for resources. They also disrupt habitats through their feeding habits. Carp are bottom feeders, stirring up sediment as they forage for food. This not only muddies the water, reducing visibility for other species, but also releases harmful nutrients and pollutants that have settled on the riverbed. This can lead to algal blooms, which suffocate other aquatic life by depleting oxygen levels in the water. Additionally, the disturbed sediments can smother plants and other organisms on the riverbed, further disrupting the food chain. The changes brought by carp can have a domino effect, impacting species that are not even direct competitors with them. From the smallest microorganisms to the largest predators, the ripple effects of carp's presence can be felt throughout the ecosystem. And it's not just the wildlife that's affected. Carp also impact water quality, making it murkier and less suitable for recreational activities like swimming and fishing. This, in turn, can have economic consequences for communities that rely on these activities for income or tourism. In essence, what might seem like a simple case of a fish out of place has significant and far-reaching implications. From disrupting ecosystems to affecting human activities, the carp's impact goes well beyond what one might expect from a humble fish. The carp's impact on Australia's ecosystems has been profound and far-reaching. The question now is, what is being done to control the carp population? In Australia, the fight against the carp invasion is a multifaceted one, involving a blend of strategies and a hefty dose of ingenuity. The most tangible approach is physical removal. Yes, that's right, manually extracting these fish from their watery abodes. This method, while labor-intensive and time-consuming, is a critical part of the battle. It's like a constant game of catch and release, only we're not releasing. On a more scientific front, biological controls are being explored. One such strategy involves the introduction of a carp-specific virus, known as the carp herpes virus, or CYHV3 for those who prefer a less graphic name. This virus is said to be capable of drastically reducing carp numbers, a promising prospect indeed. However, it's not without its controversies. The release of a virus into an ecosystem is a serious matter, sparking debates about the potential risks and benefits. There are concerns about the impact on other species and the environment as a whole. The carcasses of the deceased carp could potentially lead to a depletion of oxygen in the water, causing harm to other aquatic life. And then there's the question of what happens after the carp are gone. Will another species rise to take their place, potentially causing a whole new set of problems? Another challenge is the sheer adaptability of the carp. These fish are survivors, able to handle a range of conditions and reproduce at a staggering rate. This makes them a tough opponent, one that won't be easily defeated. Despite these challenges, the efforts continue unabated. Scientists, fishermen, and policymakers alike are working together, innovating and adapting in their strategies. They're determined to protect Australia's waterways and native species, a task that is as critical as it is complex. The battle against the carp is a complex one, with no easy solutions. But as with any battle, the key is not to surrender, but to keep fighting, keep learning, and keep adapting. The fight against the carp is far from over, but with every fish removed, every research breakthrough, and every policy implemented, we're another step closer to victory. As we look to the future, what does it hold for the carp in Australia? The future, always an enigma. But one thing is certain, it carries with it the hope of change. When it comes to the carp conundrum in Australia, change is not only hoped for, but also desperately needed. For decades, Australians have been grappling with the carp problem. But what does the future hold? Can we hope for a day when our waterways are no longer choked with these invasive fish? Well, that's the goal. And achieving it will require a combination of perseverance, innovation, and public involvement. Let's talk about the potential strategies for managing carp. Presently, there's a lot of research being conducted into more effective control methods. Scientists are exploring everything from the use of biocontrol agents to the development of carp-specific diseases. There's even talk of genetically modifying carp to produce offspring that can't survive, effectively neutralizing their reproductive capabilities. But science alone isn't the answer. The carp problem is a societal issue, and it requires a societal response. This is where public awareness and involvement come into play. Australians need to understand the full extent of the carp problem and the potential solutions. Only then can they make informed decisions and contribute meaningfully to the carp management effort. And let's not forget about prevention. Remember, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. To prevent future invasive species problems, we must learn from the carp experience. This involves improving our biosecurity measures and making more responsible decisions about the introduction of non-native species. The story of the carp in Australia is a stark reminder of the consequences of introducing non-native species and a call to action for all of us to protect our precious ecosystems. Whether you're an avid angler, a concerned citizen, or a scientist in the field, we all play a role in shaping the future. So let's make it one where our waterways are vibrant, healthy,